living la vida low carb. This show is changing lives. We talking about your diet, trying to get you feeling right. Cut up them avocados, fry some eggs, time to explore the longest running health podcast, hosted by Jimmy Moore. Time to give up the crappy garbage, we're getting into ketosis. Every day is a new step to your goal, yeah, you're getting closer. Motivated and focused, don't stop, just go. Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.
So guys, today I want to talk about a topic that has been out there for a little while. I remember when I was back in the paleo community circa 10, 15 years ago, Mark Sisson, one of the leaders in that community, was talking about how segmented sleep is still good quality sleep. Because, you know, we've grown up with this notion that we need 8 hours of sleep a night. We've always heard that our whole lives. Where did that come from? Who made that up? And so the notion is you need 8 hours as a block window that you sleep continuously, and that somehow you get all the rest you need within that 8 hour block. Well, that's kind of stupid, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all, because we're extremely bio-individual. We all have specific sleep needs that will serve us and serve us best. And so I found an article that talks about the kind of sleep that Jimmy Moore does that may be unlike any other sleep you've ever heard of before. And so I want to read from this article. It's from The Atlantic, and the title of the article, Can Medieval Sleeping Habits Fix America's Insomnia? And so they're going to talk about how in medieval times, my lady, my lord, back in those times, they very routinely had 2 sleeps a night. They would have a first sleep segment, then they'd wake up, do a few things, a few hours. You can let your imagination flow of what they did in those hours. And then they do a second sleep before they get up for the next day. And this was considered normal. All right, so let's get to the article, and I will sprinkle in my experience with this kind of sleeping all throughout. The history of first sleep and second sleep holds surprising lessons about pre-industrial life, 21st century anxiety, and the problem with digging for utopia in the past. So this was written by a guy named Derek Thompson, again at The Atlantic. So he writes it like a narrative, so stick with me here. It's 3 a.m. I'm jolted awake. The room is dark and still. I grab my phone, I scan sports scores and Twitter, and yet I'm still awake. A faceless physician whispers in my mind, to overcome middle of the night insomnia, experts say you ought to get out of bed. And so I get out of bed. I pour a glass of water and I drink it. I try to go back to bed, still awake. Perhaps you know the feeling. Like millions of Americans and hundreds of millions of people around the world, I suffer from so-called mid-sleep awakenings that can keep me up for hours. Okay, let me pause here. I started having these middle of the night awakenings at around 2:30, 3 a.m. I started having those, gosh, it's been 2-3 years ago. And when it first happened, I thought, okay, cool. I'll just get on up. I can start my day. I work for myself. There's always something to do with my podcast, with book writing, all the things that I do. It'll just give me that extra time. And here's the part that really is appealing to me about being awake that time of day. It is so quiet. Nobody is scurrying about. I'm not getting any text messages. I'm not getting notifications. Everybody's asleep except for you, it seems like. I talked to a few Aussie friends. I talked to some people that are in the UK as they're waking up. But all in all, it is so refreshing and so still and so everything that I like about the work I get to do. Like right now, there's construction like right outside my window here making so much noise. In the middle of the night, none of that noise is happening. And so I like being up in the middle of the night. The problem is when people don't time their bedtime to go to bed early enough, and then they wake up in the middle of the night, then they don't have enough rest. And so then they're not able to recuperate. And so this is where this topic that we're talking about here today of a second sleep comes into play. But I noticed 2-3 years ago that I started waking up in the middle of the night, usually around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. It shifted in recent months, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Back to the article. One day I was researching my nocturnal issues when I discovered a cottage industry of writers and sleep hackers who claim that sleep is a nightmare because of the Industrial Revolution of all things. Essays in The Guardian, CNN, New York Times, and New York Times Magazine all recommended an old fix for restlessness, something they called segmented sleep. So segmented sleep is where you go to sleep, you wake up, you're up for a few hours, and then you go back to sleep for a little while longer, and it's those two segments of your sleep. Now, I use this Oura Ring. They're not a sponsor or anything, but I just love the technology. I use the Oura Ring to track my sleep so I can see the amount of total sleep, the amount of REM sleep, the amount of deep sleep, all the things during my sleep cycle. And so Oura has a flaw, and I've called them out on it. The flaw in the ring is they assume you're a continuous sleeper all throughout the night. But what about those of us who are segmented sleepers? What about those of us who sleep the first half of our sleep, we get up for a few hours, then we go back to bed? There needs to be a toggle on that app because I'm always getting dinged in my total sleep score because I am a segmented sleeper, and they have not figured out that yet. I put it on their radar. They said they're going to talk about it, how they could fix it for people like me. But I wonder how many people there are like me, or if I'm just a weirdo. But medieval times, segmented sleeping was pretty normal. In pre-modern Europe, and perhaps centuries earlier, people routinely went to sleep right around nightfall, which is, you guys that follow me, I do my ice bath at 5 p.m., and by about 7 to 7:30, I'm headed for the bed. And so if I'm in the bed at 7:30, 5 hours later is 12:30. Well, that's 5 hours in bed. That's probably around 3.5 to 4-ish hours, maybe longer sometimes, of sleep. And then I'm awake, wide awake. And I get on up. I even check my sleep data on the Oura. Usually it's about an hour, hour and a half of deep. At that point, probably 45 minutes to an hour of REM. So I've already gotten some good restful sleep. I get up, do things for a few hours. Nothing crazy, not going to work out or anything, but nothing crazy. And then I go back to sleep somewhere between like 3:30 to 5. And then I go back to sleep and sleep a few more hours, and I'm up for my day. And the cumulative sleep that I get, restorative sleep, deep and REM, you guys see it. I mean, it's phenomenal. I get more than 2 hours of deep just about every night, most of the time significantly more. I get a good amount of REM sleep, usually an hour and a half or more per night. So this is not messing with my rest. And I've been doing this as my sleep pattern right about since October. So I would wake up in the middle of the night as of circa 2-3 years ago, 3 o'clock, and I'd sometimes get a nap in the middle of the day or whatever. But this pattern of going to sleep 7:30, getting up about 12:30, going back to sleep around 3:30 to 5, and then getting up for my day, I've been doing that since October. And it's not like I planned it. I didn't plan that, oh my gosh, I should start segmented sleep. No, it just kind of happened. It was almost like a turning on of a circadian rhythm of sorts. And I don't know. I mean, I do have Irish background, so maybe a little bit of the medieval is coming out from my Irish background. Who knows? But it's kind of interesting, right? It's very interesting. So routinely they would go to sleep around nightfall when the sun goes down. That's about what I do as well. They wake up around midnight. Again, that's what I do. Today, as of today, I got up at, it was like right before midnight. It was like 11:45 and I was awake. Only to go back to sleep a few hours later and then wake up like they normally do in the morning. Who says you have to have this continuous sleep all throughout your night? Fascinating, right? Now, if you get good sleep, continuous sleep all throughout your night, don't change your pattern. I'm just showing you that there are other ways of sleeping and getting in good rest. They slept sort of like I do, but they were zen about it, talking about the medieval time people. Then all the biohackers with sleep claim modern life came along and ruined it by pressuring everybody that they had to sleep in one big chunk. I will admit, the whole 8 hours of sleep a night, just like drink 8 glasses of water. There's so many little colloquialisms in our society about good health habits that we just believe only because they've been out there forever. And yet, how many of them are actually true? And the 8 hours of sleep doesn't apply. I think kids need a whole lot more sleep. Somewhere around 9 to 11 hours of sleep for kids is typical for a healthy kid. For typical adults, it could vary widely. And those of you that eat in ketosis, that definitely changes things as well, because you don't need as much sleep when you're keto and you're fat burning. You can probably get away with 6.5 to 7 hours. Other people need 8 to 9 hours. So it's highly variable, highly bio-individual. The romanticization of pre-industrial sleep is fascinating to me, according to the author of this article. It also snapped into a popular template of the contemporary internet analysis. If you experience a moment's unpleasantness, first blame modern capitalism. So I reached out to a historian named Roger Eckhart. His work broke open the field of segmented sleep more than 20 years ago. In the 1980s, he was researching a book about nighttime before the Industrial Revolution. One day in London, he was wading through public records. He stumbled onto references to a first sleep and second sleep. So this was normal in the 1600s. He found this data actually from a crime report. So a crime was reported, and they said, well, it was in the middle of his first sleep and his second sleep that the crime occurred. And so this was fascinating. He had never seen those phrases before. When he started broadening the search, he found mentions of a first sleep in Italian. I'm going to slaughter these, but primo sonno is Italian for first sleep. French, premier sommeil. And even in Latin, primo sonno. He found documentation in Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and Latin America of these sleep cycles as well. Remember, segmented sleep, first sleep, second sleep. When sleep was divided into a 2-act play, people were creative with how they spent the intermission. This is a fun part. They didn't have anxious conversations with imaginary doctors. They actually did something. During this awake time called Dorville, people got up to use the bathroom. They hung out by the fire. Not unsurprisingly, they had sex, or they used it as a time of prayer. They reflected on their dreams, and they commingled with the spiritual realm, both the divine and the diabolical. In the 1540s, Martin Luther wrote of his strategies to ward off the devil. Almost every night when I wake up, I instantly chase him away with a fart. So, I had never heard that quote from Martin Luther. A lot of people ask me, Jimmy, how do you get such good deep sleep? Well, there's a lot of things that I do, but one of the newest things that I recently added is this upgraded magnesium from a company called Upgraded Formulas. Go to their website, upgradedformulas.com, and you can learn all about this nano technology that they use for this particular mineral of magnesium. Again, it's called Upgraded Magnesium, and it's got all the different forms of magnesium in it, using the nanotechnology so it gets absorbed a lot better. Guys, I have seen my deep sleep improve by as much as 30 to 40% simply by adding in this product along with sunshine exposure, darkness in the room, cooler temperature, all of the things that I always have done. So again, upgradedformulas.com is the website. Go check them out. Today's sleep writers often wield Eichart's research to suggest that segmented sleep, or what Eichart refers to as biphasic sleep, two-phase, that's what biphasic, is old, and one sleep is now new. And therefore, today's sleepers are doing it all wrong. But that's not the full story, he told me. And look, if you sleep that one cycle and you get all the rest that you need, Please keep doing that. I'm trying to help those people who do have those urges to wake up at, say, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're wide awake. I can relate. I started feeling that right around 3:30 or so, like I said, 2.5 to 3-ish years ago. I first started noticing that. And then it slowly went back a little bit more. It started being 2 or 2:30. And then it went back a little more, about 1:30 to 2. And just slowly over time, it moved back to a point that I went, okay, something's happening with my sleep. And so now it's like clockwork. I will go to sleep. I will try to anyway. Usually around 7 to 7:30, sometimes pushing 8 o'clock. And then I will wake up somewhere between midnight and 1. And then I'll be up for about 3 hours. And then I'll go back to bed for another 2 to 2.5, 3 hours. That's been my routine since October. And I didn't force that. It just happened. Pre-industrial sleep was nothing to romanticize. Death stalked our slumber for many centuries. Late night crime was rampant. The home itself was a death trap, as slapdash construction left houses vulnerable to fires, leaking roofs, terrible heat and cold, and what Eckrich calls the trifecta of early modern entomology: fleas, lice, and bed bugs. As for that romantic French doorbell, it's functionally a second workday for many women. So when you get up in the middle of the night, you have that little chunk of time to do things. For the women in the medieval times, they used it to clean house and get other chores done that need to be done around the house. Maybe preparing or prepping the early preparations for that morning's meal that they would be having. So they would get up at midnight to finish all their domestic chores. And ancient soporifics, such as poisonous leaves and various opiate concoctions, were roughly as likely to kill you as they were to give you REM. So they would sometimes take things that would help them get good sleep, and other times it would kill them. Beginning in the 1700s, the Industrial Revolution, with its light, its caffeine, its clocks, and above all, its work schedule, took Europe's biphasic sleep in its hairy arms and mushed the two faces together. So right around the 1700s is when this happened, you guys, where they used to, in medieval times, have that segmented sleep where they'd have a first sleep, second sleep with a little section in the middle of the night to do things. And then when the Industrial Revolution came along with the light and the noise and the new work pattern and all the things that now make us stay hyper alert during the daytime, and then we crash at night, one continuous sleep, that's when it happened. A surging economy made a virtue of productivity, and it instilled, quote, an increasing sense of time consciousness in the Western world. By the mid-1800s, early rising movements had taken off in England and America. New artificial lights would delay your bedtime. So remember, back in the day, in medieval times, when the lights went down because the sun set, there were no, I got bright lights shining on my face right now. There was nothing like that. They had candles, and that does not emit blue light. And so all that blue light exposure delays your bedtime. We used to go to bed very early. Very early. That was typical. We went to bed with the sun going down, and we got up before the sun got up. Did a few things, a few hours in the dark, went back to sleep, and by the time we got up the second sleep, the light was out and we were awake. And that's the way the body had always done things. But now these artificial lights delayed the bedtime. New factory schedules required you to get up early. The lit world altered our internal clocks. Charles Schleicher, a Harvard sleep scientist, said, every time we turn on a light, we inadvertently take a drug that wakes us up. This is why, for those of you that struggle with your sleep, one of the things I say to do is, as the sun goes down, so should your lights in your house. When it's, after I do my ice bath at 5 o'clock, the sun's kind of going down at that point. After I get off of my live talking to you guys, I typically will go dry off and get on some fresh clothes and then I immediately turned down the lights in my house. And what that does, it's telling my brain it's nighttime, it's time to start getting sleepy, and it's time to start trying to get some good rest. When a 1990 study at the National Institutes of Mental Health deprived a cohort of male subjects of light at night, guess what happened? Their sleep became segmented after just a few weeks. I think this is what's happened to Jimmy Moore. I have been working on my sleep for many years. You guys know I've been talking about sleep for a long time. But the segmented sleep, I think, started slowly developing in this 2.5 to 3 years ago when I would wake up at, say, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't realize it at the time that that's what was happening. But that's what was happening. I was entraining my body to go back to the medieval times of how we used to sleep ancestrally. And it's fascinating, right? Like, it's not wrong. It's not bad. I still get good sleep according to this ring and the data that I get from it. It's just different. And according to this article I'm reading from in The Atlantic, it's not different. It's the original way we slept before modern light and modern conveniences came along. This makes it sound like that segmented sleep is humanity's natural habitat, and that the Industrial Revolution and modern capitalism has spoiled our perfect rest. But humans have never had a universal method of slumber, and I agree with that. Again, if you get continuous sleep all throughout the night and you do well with that, rock on. But if you have that propensity to be awake and you're wide awake and you're trying to take sleep medications and trying to do this and that and everything in between to make yourself go back to sleep quick, maybe your body is trying to tell you, get your ass out of bed, do a few things for a few hours, and then go back to bed again. We need to destigmatize that segmented sleeping is necessarily a bad thing. A study of hunter-gatherer societies in Tanzania, Namibia, and Bolivia found that most foragers enjoyed having one long sleep. 2 years later, another study found that a rural society in Madagascar practiced segmented sleep. 2 years after that, another study found that the indigenous residents of Tana, which are located in the South Pacific, largely had uninterrupted sleep. Even within pre-industrial Europe, sleep contained multitudes. Reviewing the diaries of various European writers, people like Samuel Pepys and James Boswell, Eckhart found several allusions to unified sleep. Did you go keto and thought you had to give up wine? Well, let me introduce you to Dry Farm Wines. It is the world's first sugar-free alcohol that is lower than your typical wines, organic, made at local farms that do it the right way. Most of the wines that you buy are from 3 really big companies, loaded with additives and preservatives, so many dozens of those kinds of things. You don't want all that junk in your wine. So go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and they will ship you these wines. And just because you listen to this podcast, Dry Farm Wines is going to give you a bottle in your first order for just 1 cent. Go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and you will get your bottle of wine for just 1 singular penny. Go check them out. Dry Farm Wines, you guys. It's wine o'clock somewhere. Let's go get some wine. Summarizing this complicated literature, he told me that, quote, patterns of sleep in non-Western cultures appear to have been much more diverse than those in Europe, but that they were truly diverse everywhere. Again, back to my point. If you're doing well with continuous sleep, keep doing that. But don't think you're weird if you don't have continuous sleep. There's nothing wrong with you. You just sleep differently than other people. There is no evidence that sleep was universally segmented, and there's also little evidence that segmented sleep is better. A 2021 analysis of studies of this biphasic sleep found that segmented sleeping subjects actually reported lower sleep quality and spent more time in the lighter stages of sleep. Well, I can personally attest that that's wrong for me, because I do have a tracker, the Oura Ring, that lets me see exactly how much sleep that I have. Now, it's a technology. It's, I guess, subject to flaw, but I also have my subjectiveness on how I feel, how rested I am, all the things. And so I function pretty darn well. I can tell you I function much better earlier in the day than I do later in the day, which is why I do podcasts in the morning, and I don't do podcasts generally after 4 p.m. because right around 4 p.m. I start to feel my body starting to get sleepy and heavy. And by 6 p.m. it's much more so. And then by 7:30, I'm in the bed getting ready to go to sleep for my first sleep. So one reasonable takeaway is that biphasic sleep is like anarchical foraging. Both might have served well some of the ancient populations some of the time, but neither of them offered a clear solution to the modern problems. So I asked Eckrich this question: as the historian most associated with this biphasic segmented sleep, had his research encouraged him, a spouse, or a friend to become a biphasic sleeper? No, I think that's the wrong question. It's not about encouraging people to go segmented sleep. It's about, if you have segmented sleep, let's don't stigmatize it. It can be normal. His answer was not at all. At no time in history have conditions for human slumber been better than today. Would you agree with that? At no time in history have conditions for human slumber been better than today. Conditions. I don't know. I think 100 years ago, we probably could have slept a lot better because there wasn't so much technology, wasn't Wi-Fi and 5G and toxins in the air. I don't know. I don't think I agree with that. Compared with 99% of our ancient ancestors, we have better beds. Okay, I will give them that. Better blankets, better houses, and fewer pests during the middle of the night. If the purpose of sleep is mental and physical well-being, there is a very good reason to believe that uninterrupted sleep at night best achieves that outcome. Okay, that's his opinion, and I can respect that as a sleep expert. The upshot of sleep's pre-industrial and post-industrial history is a simple, short, and consistent message. Sleep can be adaptable. Thus, the segmented sleep can be a part of that. But it improves with a routine, and I would agree with that as well. I think the routine that I have right now, where I go to sleep circa 2-ish hours after getting in an ice bath, I go to sleep for a few hours, I wake up, I'm up for a few hours, and I go back to sleep for a few more hours, and I'm up for my day. That's how I sleep. And so that's my routine. And we all need to get into whatever routine that works for us. Different tricks work for different tribes, but in the end, we are a diverse species united by a common circadian rhythm that craves consistency. And I think that's the key. Whatever sleep pattern that you normally do, keep doing that. So if you go to bed at 10 o'clock at night and you're up at 7 o'clock in the morning, then that is your sleep pattern. And you should try to stick to that sleep pattern as much as possible. For Jimmy Moore, that looks like 7:30, I go to bed. I wake up around midnight, sometimes 1. Then I'm up for a few hours. Then I go back to bed around 3:30 to 5. And I go to sleep for about 3 more hours. And that's my sleep pattern. And I do it consistently. And I have been that pattern since October. And before that, it was slowly moving in that direction. So I agree. I think the routine is everything in this. Sleep is very flexible when you look cross-culturally, says Dorothy Bruck of Australia's Sleep Health Foundation. Your body really does like that routine. Find what works for you. I've heard that somewhere. I have. And keep that routine going. I have spent countless hours obsessing over my sleep, tracking my sleep quality on sophisticated devices like the Oura Ring, and reading about the thing I cannot do well. Sleep optimization can backfire by creating an in-the-moment pleasure to solve the problem of wakefulness, as if one is trying to solve a Rubik's Cube against the clock. I don't see that I need to solve the problem of wakefulness, I leaned into it. I got to tell you, when I first started doing this segmented sleeping, it was by accident. I decided, okay, well, I'm wide awake. I'm not just going to lay here and get no sleep. So I'd make myself get up. I'd do a few things. Of course, I'd still keep the lights down low. I'd keep, my devices. I'd go chill out in my hot tub. I would just do various things. Sometimes get in the massage chair to try to relax and see if that helps. And then when I start to feel heavy and I start to feel droopy in my eyes, then I go back to sleep. Like, this isn't hard. I didn't try to purposely solve the problem of being awake. I leaned into it. And I created, unbeknownst to me, this cycle of sleep for a few hours, up for a few hours, go back to sleep. I have a first and second sleep with my segmented sleep. And I do well. And I feel good. You would never know that I went to bed at 7:45 last night. I was up at 11:45 last night. I stayed up until right around 3:30, and then I slept till about 6:30. You would never know that looking at me on camera or listening to my voice right now. You wouldn't. Because that's my normal now. As every insomniac knows, when you try to fall asleep, it's a self-defeating paradox. Insomnia is a beast that feasts on its own anxiety that it self-generates. That's true. When I reached out to Eckhart coming off of a bad night's rest, I hoped that the historian might have a practical tip for me. He did not. History is not a self-help book, but it has its own strange comforts, and our correspondence was deeply helpful in another way. He told me that he's heard from many people that simply knowing about the history of segmented sleep is a relief. And I would agree. When I read this article, when I saw this headline in The Atlantic, "Can Medieval Sleeping Habits Fix America's Insomnia?" I was like, oh, thank God. So Eckhart told me that he's heard from many people that simply knowing about the history of segmented sleep is its own relief. And that's true. Like, if you know that that's normal, if you know that having the segmented sleep is not crazy, it's not unnatural, it's totally the way things were, and I would argue the way things are for some people today, then that can relax your mind. Happily, there is mounting testimony from North America, Western Europe, and Australia that knowledge of this pattern has actually helped people alleviate their anxiety about it. Because when you wake up in the middle of the night, the last thing you go is, oh no, I can't be awake. I'm wide awake in the middle of the night. So you get anxious about it. And you're, I can't get good rest if I don't go back to sleep. So you try to force yourself back to sleep, and that creates anxiety. And this idea of now knowing that segmented sleep is a thing, Mark Sisson was onto something when he first started talking about this circa 12, 15 years ago. And so kudos to him. I remember when he said that, I just thought, that's so crazy. Why wouldn't you go one continuous night of sleep? But he always thought about early ancestors, and he knew. What was that little character? Grok. Grok knew you go to sleep, you wake up a few hours, you go back to sleep. That's how it was. So this anxiety being relieved actually permitted some individuals to fall back to sleep again, rather than see the legacy of pre-modern sleep rest as an operating manual. I see it as a balm. My 3 a.m. awakenings aren't unnatural to me anymore. It's not a disorder. It's simply an ancestral echo. When we think about that this is what our early ancestors did, changes everything, right? It's an ancestral thing that, wow, early ancestors of ours in the medieval times, they did this. They slept, woke up, and then went back to sleep again. That was their normal. Maybe that's something to tell myself when I'm awake in the middle of the night, instead of fighting the sleep doctor in my head. It'll be all right. We've been here before. So guys, the title of this article, if you want to go look it up, it might be behind a paywall, but it is such a good article. Can Medieval Sleeping Habits Fix America's Insomnia? It was published in The Atlantic. Go Google that, check it out on a search engine, but fascinating stuff, right? I think there's so much about sleep that we don't know, just like everything else in health. We don't know a lot about nutrition. We think we know some things, but we don't know everything. We don't know a lot about insulin resistance. We think we know a lot of things, but we don't know everything. All of these things, you guys, that I learned, that I try to explain to you and share to you, it's meant to get you to think about things in a different way. Because the way we've always thought of things, okay, 8 hours of sleep a night. Who has ever questioned that? Now, maybe you have, but most of us never questioned, for most of our lives, getting 8 hours of sleep a night. And I always wondered those people that needed 10, how did that make them feel? Or the people that only got 6, how did that make them feel? Or the people who woke up in the middle of the night, was up for a few hours, went back to sleep, and they ended up getting 6.5. My regular total sleep, you guys, is somewhere around 6 to 6.5 hours. That's typical of what my total sleep is. Now, most people would look at that and go, whoa, 6.5 hours, Jimmy, that's not enough sleep. But when you're in ketosis, I've had many experts on in the past who have talked about this. When you're in a state of ketosis, either from a keto or carnivore diet, you don't need as much sleep because you don't have as much repair to do. So it makes sense that you would sleep less. Now, if you're a keto person or a carnivore person and you get more sleep than that, don't think there's something wrong with you. I'm just saying in general, it'll knock off about 30 minutes to an hour of sleep that you would have gotten previously. And it's normal. Just like this segmented sleep thing, it's totally normal. We need to stop making all of these excuses for, well, I need to get to, have this straight sleep, and if I don't get the straight sleep, there's something wrong with me. No. Hopefully this article and learning about the history of medieval times with sleeping helped put your mind at ease. I think I saw one comment. Sorry, I lost all the comments from the other video before the sound was lost. High Voltage says, this is so me. I sleep early and I'm up later, catch up on some stuff, go back to sleep, been trying, quote, to fix it for a long time. So glad to know this. Yes. See, I feel like we need more discussion of this kind of thing because ancestrally speaking, they didn't sleep throughout the night. They used that middle of the night. There is this thing, this phrase you might have heard of called burning the midnight oil. Now, colloquialism in our society says, oh, that means staying up late. But what if it meant go to sleep, wake up at midnight, burn the midnight oil for a few hours, and then go back to sleep with the second sleep? What if burn the midnight oil was actually segmented sleep? I just blew your mind, didn't I? And so there's so many things like this, you guys, that I think we need to challenge paradigms. And you guys know, you followed my work. I've been out there a million years. I'm always going to get you to think about things in a different way. And so hopefully my experience with segmented sleep and learning that historically speaking, medieval times, this was normal to have a first sleep, wake up a few hours, and then go back to sleep for a few more hours.
Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com. Woo!
Have you experienced the dreaded keto flu? Did you know that most of these symptoms are actually due to your body dumping excess electrolytes? This is where Element comes in. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt with no sugar. Element is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited to folks following a keto, low-carb, or paleo diet. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio, 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium, with none of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. Everyone needs electrolytes, especially those on low-carb diets, or if you practice intermittent or extended fasting, if you're physically active, or sweat a lot. Add Element today and see how much better you feel and perform. Use the URL drinklmnt.com/Jimmy.
Tired of playing the mask game? Me too. That's why I wanted to tell you about the Unmask, This is a breathable, completely breathable. It covers, you can't even see that it's breathable, but it's breathable. Whether you're going on a plane, having to go into a store and wearing this thing, playthemaskgame.com is how you can get this mask. They come in all kinds of colors and everything. In fact, right there, you can see right through it what it is, but when you're wearing it, it does not look like it's anything different, but it's breathable, baby. Playthemaskgame.com.